like things are working. I'm going to go ahead and grab some questions from yesterday. Let's start out with yesterday's questions. Pull this up actually also. I'll put in my information here in the Reddit chat so people have that ready to go. That's all I know. And let's go find yesterday's questions and talk from that. Let's start. So we'll do just that. Let's be back and for a little daily adventure. See what today brings. That's the exciting part of life, is that we don't know what the day will bring, which can give us some hope for the future at the end of the day, right? All right, so that advice, that's today's, here's yesterday's. I didn't get to all of the questions yesterday. And as you know, if you've been here before, actually yesterday was a pretty good attendance. 50,000 people stopped by, which is kind of cool. In general, I think we had about 3,000 people watching, which means 47,000 people weren't interested. So you can either focus on the 3 that showed up or the 47 that left, right? I think that's an important way to start maybe today. It's just that recognition that there's 2 ways to view success. And it's all up to you. Do you want to look at the amazing turnout of 3,000? Or do I want to look at that? Or do I want to look at, 47,000 people weren't interested? I'll tell you which one I've chosen. What would you choose? Right? Right? Can you imagine 47,000 people stopped by yesterday and said, this isn't for me? Right? So if you think about it, and we'll get into our normal stuff, but so what is it? That's yeah, I mean, it's a pretty small percentage of people that are actually interested in what I have to say, which is interesting in of itself. I mean, which is cool. I totally get that, and it makes sense. But how would I feel if I was hanging out with a bunch of friends? Let's just do it. Let's pretend it was 100,000 people, and only 1,000 of them came around. But I'm hanging out with some friends, and 9 of them aren't interested in listening to what I have to say, but 1 of them is. I'd feel pretty dejected, wouldn't I? Wouldn't you? So I think that's just an interesting perspective that we can start with, which is that we can either choose to focus on those that don't want to hear what we have to say, those that don't agree with us, or we can focus on the 1 or 2 that do. And that's our little world. So I think that's a healthy kind of takeaway for today. So let's see what we had yesterday to talk about. I know I didn't get through everything yesterday. We had quite a bit of stuff going on. But I guess I'll just begin with the general things that I always like to begin with, which is, what do I mean when I say you are beautiful? Hello, beautiful people. What do I mean by that? And I like to take a moment. I'm going to see myself as beautiful for a minute. Because once a day, we should all see ourselves as beautiful people, right? What if everybody in the world once a day took a moment and really saw their beauty? What a much nicer place the world would be to live in, right? So I'm going to take a moment, do that for myself, and invite you to do that with me. And to do that, my exercise, it starts by seeing yourself as a whole person. And the whole person, what that means to me, is that there's a couple of things that you might not like about yourself. 1 or 2 things. And I bet you spend a lot of time thinking about those 1 or 2 things that you don't like about yourself. And it's somewhat of a burden. So the idea of seeing yourself instead, focusing on those 1 or 2 things, but instead focusing on yourself as a whole person, means that you view those 200 or 300 things that you're bringing to the table. Right? That's the honest way to look at yourself. It's not fair to look at the 1 blemish and focus on that 1 blemish. Right? You have a zit on your finger, let's say. Right? You can choose. You can either focus on that blemish, or you can see your whole beautiful body. See it as a whole. And then what happens is that little blemish actually kind of makes you unique. And that uniqueness is what's beautiful. So that's what I mean by you're beautiful, is that you're a whole person. I see you, the entire you. And I want you to see the entire you, and I want you to feel your own beauty in the world. And once you do that, hopefully it can enable you and encourage you to realize that you can do anything in the world that you want. Because the only thing that's been holding you back is your mind. And that's a choice. And you can change that choice to take it anywhere you want. So that's the lesson I like just to start out with, would like to end with. If you haven't been here before, it'll be a fun hour. I put my phone number in the comments there. So please feel free to call if you want to chat. If you have a question, please put as much detail as possible because frankly, I don't know anything about you. So the more detail, if you actually want an answer specific to your situation, the detail will help me do that. And then I'll try to also extract all questions to make them relevant to me and to you. So if you're wondering who I am, I'm a dad, no credentials, just some life experience that I come on here and I share every day. And the first piece of advice I always tell people is not to listen to everything you hear, right? We're socially inundated with all types of ideas, and it's our job as an individual to sort through all those ideas and filter out the bad ones and keep the ones that we feel really apply to us. So with that in mind, let's rock and roll. Okay, so what we got here? Dad, I just want to travel. Since there are questions here, I'll start with Hung. Dad, I just want to travel to every country and play a sport from them. I hope my body doesn't give out. I think that's an awesome, awesome goal. And I hope that you accomplish it. And I know that you can if it's something you want. That's a very doable goal. I'm not sure how North Korea will work if you're from here in the US, but most other countries you can get into, especially if you live in you're blessed to live in the US. I mean, right now, sometimes I don't feel that way, but the reality is that it is a true blessing to be born here in the US. And you have the opportunity, you basically have a passport that can get you into most anywhere in the world. So set that goal and start knocking it out, man. And tell me when you're going to hit like Bangladesh and some of the cool places in the world. Like, that's awesome. You'll see so much, you'll learn so much. You'll be wiser than most everybody in the world if you can really make that happen. And play the sports. You'll be healthy enough to do it till you're 100. So that's awesome. It's awesome. I hope please come back and give us a trip report as you start that path. Am I doing this every day? Yes, I do this every day, typically at 5. All right, so some questions from yesterday. Let's see what we got here. Sorry, the chat's a little slow here. A lot of comments yesterday, so I gotta. Okay. Hey, I have a question for me. This is from McGurgs. Hey, I have a question for you that I'd love your insight on. My father has been in and out of prison the last 7 years. He's an addict, and I'm pretty sure he's fallen back. I'm not at home. I'm overseas military. I'm not sure how to approach the situation. And I don't think he gave any additional information after that in terms of the question. So the question, as I see it, is how to approach a dad that's an addict. And I mean, there's a lot of questions that could be coming from that. So let's just talk about a couple. So what do we do with the father who's not that stable, or mother who's not that stable? Because that's what that is. In that prison, it's to some extent, right? It's sad. I mean, I feel bad for people who are imprisoned. I think that's a social failure on the part of society, that society hasn't raised them to keep them out of trouble, right? So I think we're all to blame for people being in prison. I think that's just a perspective I'll share with you. But what do you do if it's your dad? How do you manage that? Not in an always sunny kind of way, right? I think that'd be really tough. I think that'd be a really tough situation to be in, to see your dad kind of wasting his life. And frankly, I'm guessing that that's something that you're exposed to when you were younger as well, that would have had a huge negative impact on your own upbringing. So there's no question here, so I don't really know what to speak to exactly. But I am sorry, McGurgs, that you have to deal with that in your life. And I'm hopeful that you can find some peace with it and with him. is hopefully maybe at some point he'll get some help and change his life, because it's never too late. And in fact, let's take a moment to realize that no matter where we are in life, no matter how far we've fallen, it's never too late to create change in our life. And that's just a good reminder, because even if you think you're in a good place, sometimes the world just drops off a cliff. It's just the reality of the world. Sometimes great things happen, and sometimes really bad things happen. So knowing that things will eventually change. If they're bad, they can change for the better. Just like if they're good, they can change for bad. It gives hope. And so if you are, any of you who are watching right now, in a bad place, please just realize that the reality is that things can change in an instant and go from bad to great. They really can. I've seen it happen constantly in my life, constantly with people I know, where it's like, I don't know where hope's going to come from, and then it just appears out of nowhere. So I think that's a good perspective to keep in mind. Okay. How might someone approach someone they might adore? Yeah, I mean, to me, that's, yeah. I'm sorry, guys. I'm not having great questions from yesterday to pull up. Do I have anything new from here? I'm happy to really speak to these things. Hey, Soraya. Not sure if that's how you pronounce your screen name. Welcome back. Oh, okay, this is good. How can I handle my feeling of emptiness? Feelings of emptiness. I'm trying to think about times I've had feelings of emptiness. So I've had feelings of depression. I'm not sure what emptiness means. Feelings of emptiness. I felt empty. I'm trying to think, have you ever felt empty? I felt hopeless. But either way, the basic answer would be, first you have to feel your feelings. Make sure you feel it, because in order to work through a feeling, you have to really feel it. And that goes with any feeling that you have. Sadness, whatever it is, you have to feel the feeling and bring it into your whole being if you want to release it. As part of the processing of feelings. Right? So sometimes what we do is we try to compartmentalize the feeling, push it away or not feel it, but all that does is create more pain. So the first step is to really, just deal with emptiness. How I would approach it is I'd feel that feeling of emptiness and really feel it. And then I'd kind of ask myself, why am I feeling this way? And typically this is a great thing I would journal with. Right? So you write down, and I'd start writing a little narrative. And I'd say, why am I feeling empty? And typically it's going to say something's going to come up in my mind. Right? There's going to be some type of because blah, blah, blah. Right? Because I'm going to go with emptiness being some aspect of depression. Right? And it's going to be some type of aspect of because I feel that there's no purpose in my life. Oh, here we go. Emptiness. Maybe that's going to purpose. Let's assume he needs purpose. Right? I'm empty from value. I'm empty from meaning. That I could hear that in my mind. So I'd say, hey, why am I feeling purposeless? And the answer would be because I have no purpose. To which I could then say, well, this is all going to be in writing. It's a question and answer. That's the process. What could I do to not feel this way? What are some specific actions that I can bring into my life that would feel meaningful? And chances are in the process, I'd identify some things and then can go and do it. And then I can come back to it a few weeks later and ask the question, do I still feel empty? Okay, why do I still feel empty? And keep that process. And so a lot of these things, when we're working on things, they're multi-year processes. Some things we can fix quicker, and other things might take us 5, 10, 15 years to work through because they are so deep. And a lot of people are like, well, that's not worth it, right? And that's a choice. That's a personal choice you'll have to make for yourself, whether or not you're really willing to do the work that it takes to get deep and find the happiness beneath, or you're happy where you are, right? So people don't create change until it's more pain for them not to change than to change, right? And so once that pain threshold gets high enough, like, oh, you know what? I got to do some work now because we're lazy. That's what we are. We're all lazy people. That's our nature. And also there's some fear involved, right? So it's not just laziness, but it's also some of this work is laced with fear because there's some aspect in front of us that we're scared of approaching, scared of looking at something. So, okay. All right, here we go. Got another question over on today's thread, so I'm obviously going to prioritize that. From lovely Laura Beth 83. How can I be a better wife? Not that I'm a bad one. We've been married 15 years, and I feel like we are in a rut. What can I do to lift my husband's spirit when we both feel so run down? We have 4 boys, and life is so monotonous and busy. So the first thing I just threw out there, in fact, if you want to call me, I mean, not even a lot of people watching, so it could be even a less embarrassing conversation. If you want to call, my number's there. Feel free to call, and we can kind of talk through some of the stuff directly and share that information, I guess, into the kind of public. But let's just talk about marriage a little bit, and you know, and talk a little bit about what I've seen in relationships happening over time. I got divorced after 13 years of marriage. At the time, my kids were 6, 10, and 12, give or take. And with 3 kids that age. So one thing I would advise, is having been divorced and been through the process and dated a lot of divorced women, met a lot of divorced people. The first thing I would throw out there, if you can implement this into your marriage, would be one weekend a month. Give each other the weekend off, right? So every other week kind of is how I do it, right? So one weekend is his weekend to go and do whatever he wants to do, within reason for what you are kind of with marriage. But like he can go camping, he can go hang out with buddies. He could stay at home and not have to do anything. Like, hey guys, I'm here, but I'm off. Talk to your mom. And then the other reciprocal 2 weeks later, that's your weekend. I think that's so key because I think what happens when we're living with somebody and then add kids to it and add the world to it and life to it is we never get a chance to be us. And until we can find time for ourselves and fill ourselves up, then there's not enough energy to fill up anybody else who's around us. So that would be the one piece of advice I'd throw to anybody. And like I said, when they can stay home, right? If they want to stay home, absolutely welcome to stay home, and just tell the kids, hey kids, dad's off this weekend. If you want something, talk to me, right? I think that would be just a huge, valuable, thing. The other thing in general, if you haven't already approached a therapist, or a good relationship therapist, Imago is one I've worked with. I thought that taught me some skills and how to communicate. Because at the end of the day, communication is key in learning how to communicate your needs. I don't think we're all great at communicating what we want. No one teaches us how to communicate, right? There's no class in school that we take about how to communicate. We're just all just doing what we've always done or doing what we've learned in our family. So I think that's, to me, would be, if you can find a relationship therapist and do that as well. Now, the relationship therapist isn't going to give you that weekend night off idea. It's just something I've seen time and time again and thought, wow, this would really change outcomes in a real way. And then obviously everything that's going on, 4 kids is a lot of kids. I had 3 kids, and then my son left to go to college. I was like, oh my God, 3 kids is a lot of kids. Now my next son's kind of going to college, and I'm like, 1 kid. That's like a joke. But I have friends who have one kid, and they're like, "Oh my God, I got one kid," right? So you have to understand that you know, at the end of the day, it is hard to juggle, you know, 3 or 4 kids. Um, it's just a lot of people, and a lot of people to be responsible for and to have to care for. So kudos on the amount of work that it does take to do that. But give yourself and your husband some time to recharge and see what that does. I think you'll find it'll be effective. And then the therapist to help communications. Okay. And then the other thing is recognize the difference between being run down from a emotional space as well as a physical space, because I think they're two different things, and you want to attack it to each one differently. I'm proposing this summer after we buy a house, and I've never met my dad. Give me some advice about marriage. You only learn after being married. Well, I'm sorry that you've never met your dad, if that's important to you. Um, so congratulations on your proposal. Um, and I hope the house isn't contingent, like the proposal's not contingent on the house, right? um, at the end of the day, I hope that you're proposing whether or not you buy a house. I hope that's not connected. I can explain that more if that doesn't make sense. So, okay. So some things you learn only after having been married. So I've been married, so I just a relationship perspective. I got married when I was 23, got divorced when I was 35, 36, something like that. Dated for about 4 years. Dated about 100 people, some for one date, some for a month or two. Then went into a relationship, and was in a relationship until recently, about 5 years. So that's kind of my experience. My experience is really 2 relationships. One when I was younger, one when I was a little bit older and more mature, and then a whole bunch of dating, which I'm back in the game. And what a fun game it is. Actually, it's fun in some way, but it's also just, well, we can talk about that. Okay, so things I've learned about. I'm going to talk more about relationships. Relationships in general. What have I learned about relationships? Because at the end of the day, I don't know that marriage is a construct, and either we're committed in a relationship or we're not. I mean, I think at the end of the day, marriage says you're committed to live the rest of your life with that person. That's the construct of it. So the first advice I would give you is understand the 5 love languages, understand what his love languages are, and understand what your love languages are. There's a book called The 5 Love Languages. You can check them out. And then, so I'd recommend that book and at least concept. I mean, actually, you don't necessarily need to read the book, but get the concept of it and figure out, because whatever household you're in, there's probably 2 or 3 primary love languages. And whatever household he came from, they could be different. And so what happens is if we're using different love languages on each other, then we don't feel appreciated. We don't feel valued. So that'd be number 1. Number 2 is I would work on your marriage before you have issues, which is, to me, I think a big thing that once you've been in a relationship for a year, you have issues whether you know it or not. Because part of what happens in a relationship is that we end up restricting our freedom to make the other person happy. It's just the nature of the beast, right? That in order for, no matter, how do I say this? Because it's somewhat sad that it works this way, but it does kind of work this way. It's that in order to, I'm going to use words, but I want you to maybe look through the words that I'm saying a little bit. So in order for me to be in a relationship with the woman I'm in a relationship with, she has certain needs, and I can either intuitively know them or she stated them, whatever they are. And so I have to kind of contort myself a little bit to her needs. So that's which is some aspect of me giving up freedom, and she does the same thing for me, so we can harmoniously live together. And the goal is that we give each other enough freedom to become whatever people we want to become, and then the relationship can bind us together. But that's a really hard growth process. It's hard, especially, it's one thing if you don't have any kids, but you throw in some kids, you throw in some life into the picture, and it fundamentally changes the complexity of how to do that. So the first thing is just recognizing this aspect of how you're changing and hoping that you can give her awareness to recognize the aspect of how she's kind of changing in ways that don't suit you or don't suit her. So you can then have conversation around it. And because the biggest thing is awareness. And what I think ends up happening a lot is that, people contort and contort and contort. And by the time they go to a therapist, they're just like, forget it, man. This just isn't worth it. It's just too much work, too much of a headache. Like, you've gotten to the point already sometimes of no return, or there's an affair, or whatever it is. Something happens that, because the relationship got too far ahead of itself, right? It broke a little bit more than it could really handle. So I think if you're serious about relationship, so then what you really have to do is, when the relationship is good, that's when you start working in therapy on things. Because even when it's good, there's probably some bad stuff that you're not thinking about or not talking about or not considering, that you can then bring out in therapy and work on it while it's early. And then frankly, it's fun to work on your issues with somebody that you love, because that's kind of a joint activity, right? So the other thing I think I'd throw out there is just recognizing that no matter how much you love whoever you love, they're not going to be everything in every way. So really, and part of this is they have to be on whoever you're in a relationship with needs to be on the same page with you. So it's just a realization that they can't be your everything. They're going to be your best friend, right? That's the hope for a relationship. That's all I really expect from a relationship, is a best friend. But if you expect them to be the person to always comfort you, and the person that does this and this and this, it's not a realistic expectation to throw on one person. Now, I think early on in a relationship, when you're in that lust phase, it's easier to do that. Thank you for the award. So when you're in that lust phase, it's easier to be that for the other person, because you're willing. But over time, it gets a little bit tiring, right? And so recognizing that and making sure that you each have groups of friends that your friend that you can complain to, so all your complaining doesn't go to your partner, or the person that you can, whatever it is, that you break down those responsibilities. The person you can go hiking with, if you're a hiker and your partner doesn't like to hike, no problem. I hike with Rob, no big deal. That's what we do. We hike, So I think that's kind of a key aspect. So let's see, what are some other things that I would throw out there from a relationship perspective? Well, I guess that's good for now. Let's go to something else. I'm sure I'll think of more stuff, but those are the things that, come to mind. Yeah, and if Ed Tower, your wife, needs to hear it, throw it up here, and you can send her the link to this, and she can read it later. In fact, I guess also I put my YouTube channel. I need 100 people, and I won't ask any more. But if you can subscribe, it's at the top there. My YouTube channel's there, and that would be awesome, because that way I can name it, and then thank you for the award, and then let people find it more easily. And then my phone number also, if anybody wants to talk. I see we've got about 15 minutes left for today. And I am here every day here, I'll put this in here. So I have to make sure they put my information there. I'm here every day, pretty much 5 o'clock Eastern Standard, unless work gets in the way or life gets in the way. So if this is of value, please feel free to come back. If I don't get your question today, I'll try to open with it tomorrow. Usually the first 10 or 15 minutes, there's less questions, and then I'll try to answer them, and you can check them out. So, okay. Yeah, so, and it's interesting. I'm just going to comment on this. My wife needs to hear this, LOL. So, when I first got married, all these guys were giving like all these jokes about marriage. There's a bitterness that happens over time because when people lose their freedom. That's why there are all these jokes about marriage. It doesn't have to be that way, right? If we're mindful and we create different outcomes. So, yeah, just think about that. All right. Dick Pickett says, I got my first job out of college and I'm struggling to stay on top of things and had a poor performance review. Feel like I might be fired soon if I don't meet their expectations, having issues with procrastination. So I'm sorry to hear they had a poor performance review. And I get the anxiety that you could have around being fired. And it does sound, if you're saying that there's some procrastination issues. So here's how I would actually approach something like this. Because at the end of the day, your boss, I assume, is a decent person. Most people in the world are decent people. I'd go and straight to them and say, hey, look, boss, I see the performance review. I really love my job. I want you to know that. And I want you to know that I've kind of figured out that I think I have some procrastination issues and I'm going to work on them. And before you do that, you should have a plan on what are you working on? What's the program that you're going to approach to help you with your procrastination issues? Right? So, and it could be that it's executive function related. It could be, so find a therapist that specializes in working on procrastination issues and commit to that. And then you can tell your boss, hey, look, I know kind of see where I am. And I want you to know this is what I'm doing to improve. I think in general, people, once we can demonstrate that we're trying to improve, will cut you slack, especially a youngster with the first job. And demonstrate, make it clear how you're improving on a weekly basis. And kind of bring it to mind. Hey, this is what I'm doing. Also, really important is I'm assuming that they're saying, hey, you need to be doing X, and you haven't been doing X. Meaning that you need to make sure that whatever they're asking you to do is measurable so you can know if you're succeeding or not. Right? Because sometimes it's just like, we don't like what you're doing. Well, what do you want me to do differently? Right? So you need specific, and I'll take some of my recommendation back actually now that I've thought a little bit more about it, of how I would approach it. I think the first conversation with my boss would be, hey boss, poor performance review. I don't think this is reflective of what I can do in the long run. I see I have some work, and I'd like you to give me some advice on what you'd like to see differently happening. What are 4 or 5 different things that we can measure to show success? And then you can start working to that. And then maybe not mentioning the procrastination piece, but at the same time, finding that person that can help you with the procrastination issues. Thank you for the gift. And I think that's how I would approach it. Yeah. Madam G's, I'm not sure. If you're trolling or not, if you're serious, I'm really sorry. And then my phone number, if just for what it's worth, if you want to call, if anybody wants to call and chat, 470-575-0111. Put it in there. I'd encourage a call. I think that's always a fun way to actually get a little bit deeper for me. So please. And that line only works like from 5 to 5:45 when I do this. It's a SIP line, so don't worry. Okay, so what's we got here? So good luck on the proposal, Bitter Buffalo. I think that's, yeah, okay, cool. It's super awesome. It'll be a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. have fun with the proposal. Do something fun. Like, it doesn't have to be a big thing. I don't want you to even take, like a bunch of pictures. I think that's all kind of show offy. But like, find something really meaningful that you guys can look back and really appreciate it. Because you only get to propose once, if you're lucky. If you're lucky, I guess if you get divorced, you get to propose again. But you know what I mean. Okay. Got a financial question. That's cool. From J.B. Anderson. Should I take out $30K from my 401k to pay off all my debts and have $10K left over for a house down payment? It will give me a fresh start, and I'm also investing in a Roth IRA in 28 with $40K in the 401k. So right now, I do think with COVID, you can take out the money as long as you pay it back. So I think you're asking the question, and the truth is I don't have all the numbers, but maybe I'll give some perspective, and thank you for the gifts, guys. Because I had to have to run the numbers, right? So the thing about finances is you need a spreadsheet. This is how, let me explain how I'd approach something like this, and then you can run the numbers yourself. So the question is, assuming that you're not going to pay the money back into the 401k, right? So if you can pay the money back into the 401k, then I don't think there's any penalty. And sure, that does make sense because, again, actually, the devil's in details. I don't know if you pull the money out, if you're gonna have to pay taxes, but this is the approach. I'm not gonna tell you what it should be, but I'll tell you what my spreadsheet would look like if I was approaching this question. Okay, so I'm gonna have a spreadsheet, and I'm gonna figure out the following: if I take the money out of my 401k, are there taxes? If so, how much are the taxes that are due on that? And then I'd say at the same time, when am I going to be, if I pay, how much interest would I accrue over the next time period that it would take me to, right? You hear where I'm going with it? So it's not a clear thought here because it depends on all the details. So assuming there's no tax involved and you can pay it back, so then sure, you're saving all that interest and all that credit card interest and all that. So it's a no-brainer. But it's at the end of the day, it's a financial decision, and financial decisions get made in spreadsheets, taking into account taxation and the actual cost. So run it. If you want to share it with me, you can DM me and I'll look it over and maybe even spend a minute or two thinking about it. Or personal finance, I think also would probably, I'm sure guys there would be happy to look it over for you. In fact, that's probably the better approach to get that crowdsourced. But create that spreadsheet and the answer will be made for you. So, but either way, how cool is that to have no debt and then make sure you don't pick up any additional debt? Okay, let's talk about anxiety. I think anxiety is something a lot of us have to deal with, something I personally spent a lot of time on. I always say that the way to work with anxiety, especially when it's bad, you have to work with meds and you got to work in your head. Because that's where anxiety is, right? It's in our head. Thank you for the gift. At the end of the day, right? If we can get out of our head, there's actually no more anxiety, right? And that's the question. Thank you for the gift. Appreciate this, guys. But maybe I'll teach you all something that might know about, maybe you won't know about getting out of our head. And this is something I've learned a little bit along the way. And it's a very simple practice. It's about being in the moment, right? And so what I want you to do is identify anything in your surroundings, anything. And I want you to just be aware of that thing. So for me right now, I'm just being aware of my phone and the camera on top of it, and just creating awareness. And that's coming from a place of awareness, right? So there's two ways we can approach the world. One is through this viewing the world through the eyes of awareness. And the other is in our head, the voice in our head, all that rumination, right? So we can choose to get out of our head a little bit if we can bring ourselves to awareness. And that can give a little bit of peace. Now, if you can stay in awareness, which is kind of what the exercise of meditation is, which is a hard thing to do, right? What happens is even some of those body aspects that anxiety, where I don't know where you feel your anxiety, I feel it in here. It gets all crunched up, right? So that over time will calm down. And you can also help that a little bit just by breathing, just deep breaths. Breathe all the way in, as long as you can. Hold it, and then breathe all the way out. Do that just in and out. So if you can take those 2 steps, just to take a moment, bring awareness, just try to get out of your mind and bring your awareness to whatever you're looking at, just awareness. So you're not in your head anymore. And then the breaths in and out. Sometimes I find that can get rid of 50%, 70% of the anxiety that I have. It's not 100%, but I would say that anxiety is something that we really can work on. In fact, I have a great quote downstairs, which is, anxiety is a misuse of your imagination. And it's so true, right? It's because that's what we do when we're anxious. We make all these what ifs, what ifs, what ifs. Now, as you get a little bit older, what you're going to find is that you're going to look back and say, you know what? I've imagined a lot of really horrible worst case scenarios over my life, which have never happened. Maybe I'll just stop doing that. Maybe I'll stop assuming all these bad things will happen. And one thing you'll notice if you start doing that is that it feeds itself. Because once you can say, oh, you know what? Let's say today I'm having anxiety and I'm like, oh, the house is going to catch on fire and I'm going to die. And then I'm like, well, wait a second. Let's go with the assumption that the house won't catch on fire and I won't die. Well, the next day when I get anxious, there's this natural, I can reflect back and say, well, yesterday I get anxious about the same thing and it didn't happen. So maybe I won't be anxious about that now. And then over time, what ends up happening is you start saying to yourself, there's so many times in my life when I've been worried about X, Y, and Z, and it turned out that didn't even happen. Am I really going to give myself that headache today? So that's one thing I threw out there. And the other thing is just working with a therapist about some of these mental things, like what's the specific anxiety, right? Because there are so many types of anxiety, and working on those things that are specific to that. So I think I have 2 more minutes. I also see that it looks like there might be a decent amount of people watching. So I wanted to share one thought that I always like to share, and I'll be back, tomorrow at 5. I'm usually here at 5 Eastern. Happy to chat, and I'll try to answer some of the questions. I'll be honest, my phone says I have 2 minutes left and there's 6 people watching. So I don't really know what's going on. In fact, if anybody wants to tell me, I'll take a look down here at the bottom. But that's my reality, and that's the reality I'm kind of working on. But I do want to just take a moment because my gut is there's more than 60 at this point that are watching. And, there's quite a few people watching. Okay. So if I don't, how much time do I have? Oh, I have some time. Okay, fine. All right. So in that case, let me keep talking about anxiety a little bit, and then we'll talk about our greatest weakness, great false truth. Thanks, guys. So let's talk more about anxiety, because I do have a little bit of time tonight, and I think it's key, and I think we all struggle with it. I think it's probably like the one of these, it's like the U.S. disease, which is crazy. Like, how can it be that half of us are probably on the SSRI, 45%? I don't know what it is, but it's a huge percentage of our population is on SSRI. When the truth is that anxiety is one of the things we can actually do something about through learning techniques, right? There are techniques we can approach and use to help soothe anxiety, right? So, and that's the goal. In my mind, what I've learned is that there's 2 aspects that we have to, if we want to find happiness, we want to find peace. I don't know if happiness is the right word. I throw the word happiness a lot. I think we all talk about happiness, but I think it's about finding inner peace, right? I think there's certain things that we want to feel. We want to feel inner peace. We want to feel freedom, right? We want to feel Um, I think those are kind of like core feelings that we want. And in order to achieve it, there's two things that have to come into balance. One is we have to get in control of our mind. And our mind's been conditioned from when we were born. Our parents start conditioning us. This is the nature of kind of how it works. Our parents start training us in their ways. And the problem is they weren't, and we know our parents now because we can see them as adults, hopefully. And we can see that our parents are people, just like we are. So here we have people training new people to be people, giving them the same conditioning that their parents gave them, and not giving them the tools to find peace. Add to that society and friends, right? And our friends are just going to mimic what their parents told them. And then society is kind of coming in and telling us whatever society's decided to tell us. So there's all of these conditionings that we go through as kids that we have to undo. And that's really what it's about. And it's, I'd almost say, it's not that society means to lie to us. I don't think it's, and I do believe there are people that kind of feel that way, that society is lying to them to control them or something like that. I think it's that we're all lost until we find a way that works, right? So society is lost until it finds a way that works. And the part of the reason is that we're all individuals. And what works for you doesn't work for me, and what works for me doesn't work for the next person. So what we have to do is we have to unravel all these messages that we got from our parents, and all these messages we got from our friends, and all these messages we got from our teachers, and all these messages we got from society. And each of them have to be explored. It's a lot of work. You have to explore each of them and say, does this fit me or not? Is this an assumption that I want to work with? And they can be as basic as, right? I'll ask you a very basic question. Is the world a world of surplus, or is it a world of not enough? I think most of us watching, once I ask the question, I think you might say maybe there's surplus. But I think most of us will say it's a world of not enough. And which is sad, because the reality is, if we took all the food and we passed it out, there'd be plenty of food to go around. But we hoard it because we all come from this attitude of not enough. And it's pervasive. So there are all these different societal beliefs that we don't even know that we believe, that first of all, they're not true. And second of all, they don't help us live a happy and healthy, peaceful life. So that's the issue, is that we have to go back and we have to go through all of our beliefs one by one and examine them. That's a hard process, but the value is that if we do the work, we can come out the other side really feeling like we own the world. And isn't that a much better way to live, right? We're all working so hard. Like even, think about it. You work so hard, there's a car you want. And you work so hard, you've been saving for years, you get the car, and then it's a couple moments of happiness. I mean, it's awesome. I mean, you got the car, or whatever it is for you. I don't know what it is for you, right? You got it. And then it just kind of goes away and you're working on the next thing. Like, what kind of life is that we're constantly not at peace in order to get a couple of things of happiness? Like, it's a joke in a way, but that's our reality. And that's kind of what we go along with, because that's what we know. That's what society tells us is how the world works, until you stop and you think for yourself, what do you want your life to look like? And you could say that works for me. Great. As long as that brings you peace, that's awesome. But if it doesn't, then maybe instead of hitting your head against the wall, it's time to look for a path that might give you what you really want, which is constant peace. So that's anxiety. Since there are people kind of here watching, I'm going to take a few minutes and I'm going to talk about our false beliefs. And so I'll do that for a few minutes, and then I'll kind of bring things to a close. And I am here every day at 5, and I'm always happy to answer questions. And I appreciate everybody showing up. It's always meaningful that I can add value to the world. That's kind of my goal. As long as there's 10 people here, I try to show up and do this. So I appreciate the opportunity to share and maybe impact your life, because I think it's an important thing. I don't know what you can do in the world to make the world a better place, but to take a moment and just step out and do it. If it means buying a homeless person a meal, whatever, it can be a small thing. It doesn't need to be a big thing, but just step out and do it. If I can inspire everybody to do that, because I really do believe there's this butterfly effect of good, and we're either part of the problem of society or part of the solution. So thank you for allowing me to be part of the solution, and I hope that we can all do that together. So the big false truth I want to share with this idea, because I think it's such an important idea that's so pervasive that you don't even know what's going on. And that once you understand it, right, we can't change until we have awareness. So once you have awareness, you can create change in yourself. And I think this is the one thing that fundamentally, like if I could just share this with the world, I think we could actually change the world for better. And I didn't know about it until 5 years ago, 8 years ago. I don't know how to figure it out, but the idea is that there's a false belief, right? And a belief meaning something that you believe, right? So it's not a truth, it's a belief. It's something you believe, but it's false. And it's somewhere ingrained in you, deep down, and it's motivating most of everything that you do. So I'm going to demonstrate it here. I'm explain how I experienced it. And then I'll let you take the opportunity. For you, it's going to be something different. I think at the end of the day, at the bottom of everybody's turtles, as they say, actually no one says that, as I just said, at the bottom of the pile is some aspect of I'm not enough. But just to give you an example, you do something wrong. And for those who I say this pretty much every day, so I apologize for repeating it. I just think that it's such a fundamental thought, and it brings so much happiness to your own life once you figure it out, that like you can ignore everything else I say. If you can get this one thing in your life, it's the most important thing that I can share. So just to give you an idea, you take a test, you don't do well, fail it. There's an initial thought that comes to mind. It's going to be something like someone shared on crap. In fact, I'll encourage everybody to share it. Get down to the bottom here. So for some people, right, you fail the test, it's I'm crap. Another person, I'm stupid. Another person, it's going to be I suck. Right? Whatever it is, there's some initial thought that comes when you fail. So what I want you to do is I want you to grab onto that, and I want you to start questioning that thought. Why do I think I'm crap? Why do I think I suck? And what you'll find is, and if you start asking why, you'll keep getting deeper and deeper and deeper into yourself. And ultimately, underneath all of that, there's going to be some false belief, which for me was, I'm not enough. I don't know what it'll be for you. And then recognizing, wait a second, I am enough. Changing that perspective will change your entire motivation. So I spent my whole life proving to the world that I'm enough. Making sure I studied so hard that I wouldn't fail. Making sure I worked so hard that I wouldn't fail, that I'd have enough money. Right? So that was my motivating factor, and I had no awareness of it. So I don't know what that is for you, but take a moment and ask yourself the question next time you give yourself a hard time. Why do I feel this way? And what's underlying it? And see how deep you can get and what you can learn about yourself. And I think you'll find that more than any other exercise you can do, that it will fundamentally change the rest of your life. So with that, one other thought, and we'll end. First of all, if this was helpful, please say thank you. I always like to see the thanks. It's inspiring to me. So please just take a moment to say thank you if anything I said was helpful. And I do read everything after. I go back and I read over all the comments and all that kind of good stuff. So I just want to share, I think I post there, you're beautiful. That's kind of my headline. And I want to explain what I mean by that. And the first thought that I want you to understand is that the way this works is that I want you to understand that you're a whole person. You might focus on the one or two negative aspects of yourself, but I know that for every negative aspect, you have 200 or 300 amazing attributes. So it's not fair for you just to focus on those couple of negative things. It's not looking at yourself truthfully. Look at yourself as a whole person, which is how the world views you. And I think you would agree that the world views you as a good person. And part of the fact that you have a little bit of an imperfection is what makes you beautiful. Because if we were all the same, there would be no beauty. There'd be no difference in any of us. Right? So part of our imperfection is what actually makes us beautiful. And back to relationships, eventually what we come to love in our spouse and our partner are some of their imperfections. So first, I want you to see yourself as a whole person, not just focus on the one or two negatives. Take a moment, even now, please see your own internal beauty. And then once you've done all that, I think it'll inspire you to realize that you can do anything in the world that you want. And the only thing that holds you back is your mind. So hopefully that all makes sense. And I hope you'll join me again. Another day, 5 Eastern, here on Distant Socializing. And then also my YouTube channel. I'll throw that in here. I think I needed to get some more people to subscribe so I can name it. If you don't mind subscribing, once it hits, if you see 100 people, you can stop. You don't have to subscribe at that point. So, I'll look forward to continue our path tomorrow. So cheers. Have a great evening.